worked with Elizabeth's husband.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I met Elizabeth. They worked together, and Elizabeth worked for the county, and they had a party or something at their house, and I went over, and that's how I met Elizabeth. She worked in the county attorney's office, and so she and I had a lot in common because of the work with the county and stuff. And then ultimately, Anthony moved over to the county. And my ex-wife.
Oh, does Anthony work for the county?
Oh yeah, he's worked for the county for years. Oh yeah.
This guy.
And then. So this is actually a very funny story. It's quite sexual. So my ex-wife.
Morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, how are you?
Morning, all right.
Anthony came with Elizabeth.
Oh, he's here. Excellent.
Shelley left and went to University.
I said to take over for you.
And then
No worries, yep.
she brought my ex-wife with her for University in Harrow at the time. And then Lydia was University's secretary, Jay University. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because Mo was. Yeah, Mo was there.
Hi, how are you? Good.
So then I got to
How
know
are you?
Lydia. And then ultimately Shelley left for University in Harrow. And Deborah Zampetti was working at the county. Deborah Zampetti comes along and works over there. So I got that relationship. And then ultimately Ben passes away, and they bring in Barbara. And then Barbara's hooked up with Lydia, so yes, I have this connection to all the land use attorneys who do all this for 30 years.
It's a vicious web.
Small world.
How are you?
I'm used to these early hours.
Yeah,
Over here, anyway.
I'm not either.
I see. I was thinking you might have brought two big full packs of that.
No, this is an unopened pack, so I figured maybe that'll last today.
Maybe, yeah. How you doing, pal? Good, yeah. Okay. Quiet, thinking about it. So this morning, there's no need to swear on anybody, right?
No, you don't. I just swear anybody in this one.
Okay. I don't have to go through my spiel. Just open it for business, huh?
Can you get that script for the workshop clerk? It looked like she just had us do the pledge and the small assignments.
I'm not sure you really need to do anything else
Okay.
other than pledge allegiance.
I think that's all, so it was really short.
And
I think there was a separate script.
You do a roll call too.
And there's no, minutes, right?
Yeah, all your action items should be this afternoon.
Okay. David, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'd stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see, could we have the roll call, please?
Jamie Girardi,
Here.
Christopher Poole,
Here.
John Mooney,
Here.
Matthew Munns,
Here.
Derek Potlitz, Chris Williams,
Here.
Chairman Charles Gray.
Here. And we have proof of publication? Not for this meeting?
I don't think you need it.
Okay. All right, very good.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the Planning Commission. David Engel, Planning and Economic Growth Director. I wanted to just extend my appreciation for the Planning Commission to accommodate a very busy August. I know you're all volunteers, but your role and your input is critical for us to get these important initiatives through the finish line. The first item on our workshop this morning is tree protection discussion. I'm going to invite Amanda Hill, our principal planner and lead planner for this initiative, to come up and provide a brief PowerPoint and overview. And I know that we do have some visitors in the audience that I spoke to the Planning Commission about that want to just basically have a conversation about our tree protection, tree mitigation efforts. So,
Okay.
Amanda, please come up. Thank you.
So we'll give them an opportunity to come and speak, right? Give them an opportunity to come up and speak.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Amanda Hill, Planning Development Economic Growth.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Amanda Hill, Planning Development Economic Growth.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. So today I'll be presenting a brief summary on the staff efforts regarding the research on tree preservation. This is an ongoing effort to identify the most appropriate ways to preserve trees within the county. Following the last public hearing at the LPA on March 20th of this year, there was a workshop held by the LPA on June 5th. There was also a board-adopted resolution, Resolution 25-291, which essentially updated the tree mitigation fund resolution that was previously in place. Specifically, it clarifies the use of funds, the administration of said funds, and increases the contribution rates to the tree mitigation fund. Now, moving forward, on August 21st of this year, there will be an item at the LPA public hearing to remove the references to the contribution rates that are currently in section 802.3C, and also to remove the purpose and authorized locations that are identified in section 802.3E. And these are necessary to align with the resolution that was adopted by the board. Staff is targeting the LPA meeting in October to bring forward a more substantial amendment to section 802, which, apart from the code cleanup, will also include recommendations that were provided by the Planning Commission, local planning agency, at the June 5th meeting, including clear-cutting preservation, preservation of tree stands, and density bonuses. Staff has been working on following the recommendations from that meeting, including conducting research on how other jurisdictions protect trees, identifying how to preserve stands of trees with density bonus incentives, speaking with developers who are clear-cutting and those who are preserving trees, considering green space requirements on properties of a certain acreage, and keeping the updates simple. So I just included this slide here to show some of the research that was previously done during the prior drafting of the amendment that came before you earlier this year. So you can see here that the rate that was previously in place for Pasco was $50 per inch. With the resolution that was adopted in July, that has been abated to $75 per inch. And then you can see some of our neighboring jurisdictions, their fees. You can also see the last fee revision year. Some of them have caps, some of them don't. and then whether or not they have a grand tree or a heritage tree ordinance. Let me know if you'd like me to stay here for a bit, or if I could.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So it, under the Pasco adopted 7/15/25, it lists what constitutes a heritage tree. Did the board adopt some specific regulations regarding those trees?
So this was what was adopted. Other than this, it also mentions that the trees have to have a condition rating or good or better as determined by the ISA, the rating system.
I think the question goes more to, did they adopt some restriction regarding the heritage trees, or are we just naming them?
There wasn't a restriction that was identified to
Okay,
heritage
so we're
trees.
just identifying
These were just the
them,
ones
that
that were
if these are,
identified.
there's heritage trees. but
These
we don't-
specific species,
We
yes.
don't have any current regulations regarding a heritage tree.
No.
Amanda, is it a higher mitigation rate for heritage trees? Is that? what was
Yes, the
adopted?
mitigation
Okay.
rate for the heritage trees would be $150
So
per
you
inch.
pay more,
All right, that's what I was trying to
you-
understand. So it's double.
Yes.
I don't know the exact amount, but I'm just saying,
So is that on here somewhere? I don't see
It's
it.
not. It's in the resolution, though, that was adopted. So the regular contribution rate would be $75 per inch, and for the heritage trees, it would be $150 per inch.
Can you go over the, I think it would be helpful, could you go over or summarize the resolution?
Sure. So it does a couple things. It updates the purpose that was previously stated. Let me just get my copy of that here so I can read it to you.
Yeah, do you have extra copies of this?
I do not, but I can send it via email if that's something that I can do. It's
Yeah,
currently
here.
on the board records, 25-291. I checked
Yeah,
yesterday
if you
evening.
could- If you could, send it, that'd be
The
helpful.
adopted.
Everybody like to have a copy, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Terry's gonna get some copies to you.
Thank you.
Can I continue in the meantime?
Yes, yeah. Any other questions yet, so far? Okay. So this, I wonder, $150, that's per inch, and that's unlimited?
Yes, there's no
Yeah.
cap.
Okay.
And that would be for, go back.
100 heritage tree, right?
I love how each time I use this, it doesn't go the right direction. I'm trying to go back to the beginning, and it's not letting me. Hey, Patty?
It never works, you know, when you're standing in front of a bunch of people.
Other direction.
You want to go to the end?
To that chart that I had up with the mitigation comparison.
There we go.
So for the heritage trees, 34 inches and larger if it's a live oak, and then 24 inches larger if it's a southern magnolia. Those trees would have that $150 per inch fee. If it's less than that, it's not considered a heritage tree per the resolution that was adopted.
And when you say 34 inch, that's diameter or circumference?
Diameter at breast height, that's correct. Okay, so going into the research after the June workshop, staff attempted to look further afield for different ideas since the neighboring counties to us were already considered in the research that was done for previous efforts. Some of the other jurisdictions that we looked at was Alachua County, where there's a minimum of 20% tree canopy required to be maintained. And that tree canopy preserved is prioritized by contiguity, quality, size, or the presence of heritage trees, natural groupings, aesthetically complementary trees to the project design, location of trees in the required buffered areas, and trees that provide shade to parking or buildings, as the case might be. We also looked at Collier County, where they have credits that are provided for minimum tree planting requirements, and that's based off of the existing trees that are preserved. It's a formula-based credit system. They also provide a density bonus of 10%, or up to 10%, for wetland, wading birds, and habitat restoration. And we thirdly looked at Brevard County, and I'd like to go over a case study of what we found when we looked at their code. Essentially, they combine a robust contribution rate with a requirement to maintain tree canopy within the area of alteration. And that is why we selected them as this case study for today's workshop. The area of alteration as defined by their code is the area of the site, parcel, or lot where alteration and or disturbance will occur.
So this canopy, is that, what are you making a recommendation, or are we just talking about what other people are doing now?
We're just talking about what other people are doing right now. So this is what their contribution rates look like. Essentially, it's a formula, and it's $400. There are a couple different options. Basically, if there's a known number of trees removed and the known diameter of the trees in total, they multiply $400 times the number of trees plus $120 times the total diameter of the trees being removed. That's the most basic formula that they have, and then there are a couple other considerations there. We're not proposing any additional rate changes during the session. I just wanted to include this slide for context as to how this works with the existing regulations that they have for tree protection.
So when they come in, they're gonna have to give you a tree survey?
They do require a tree survey, yes.
So what is this? This is compensation for trees of known number removed but unknown total diameter. How, if we do a tree survey, don't we know the total diameter and the number removed?
They should. I do think they're catering for persons who maybe have removed trees without previously doing the survey, because even though it's in the regulation, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would have followed the regulation. So this section of their tree fund is for both persons who followed the regulations versus persons who may have cut trees without getting the necessary approvals prior to doing so.
Whereas, to me, that formula reads as $400 per tree plus $120 per inch of that tree.
Correct.
$400 per tree for any tree.
For any tree, then $120 for every inch of diameter.
Again, this is not something that we're considering for the update. This is just a
Research.
overview of what they did, and
Yeah, well, that's
we
good. I
included
mean,
it.
this is what's common in other areas, is what you're saying, yeah.
Correct, yes.
And then, sorry, and then if they don't know the diameter for whatever reason, it's $3,000 per tree. So knowing the diameter is beneficial, hopefully.
Maybe.
Yeah. Mhm.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Depends if it was one of those
Yeah,
huge trees.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay. So for commercial, institutional, and industrial parcels that are 3 acres and less, they are exempt from the canopy preservation requirements.
Thanks.
Terry, do I need to make a motion to receive and file? Or request it? Credit for canopy preservation is not given for areas that are excluded from the area of alteration as previously defined.
What's the minimum size that, I'm sorry?
3 acres,
3 acres.
yes. And landscaping credit is provided for preserved or relocated trees in excess of the minimum required. So something that we noticed with Brevard County, a couple other communities did it as well, is that their tree preservation regulations and landscaping regulations are located within the same section of the code. And that makes it a bit more clear in terms of how one works in relation to the other. And these are the minimum percentages that are required for that canopy preservation within the area of alteration. So it effectively reduces clear cutting. So for residential properties, commercial, institutional, public facilities, the percentage is 10% that needs to be maintained of that existing tree canopy. There is also a requirement for tree planting, so that's also an additional 10%, which leads to total canopy percentage in the area of alteration of 20% within that development pad.
Okay.
And then for industrial, those percentages, it's 10%, 5%, and 15% respectively. I know that you have the copies of the resolution now. Do you want me to go through the sections now, or do you want me to continue?
Got it.
the one that was adopted by the board on the 15th.
Pleasure here. Anything? Okay. John?
I'm good.
Anybody?
This is helpful.
Okay?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let's continue.
Alrighty, I will continue then. Now, Brevard offers a 25% reduction in this requirement that I previously discussed if the canopy that is preserved is in a continuous tract. And for properties where that is applicable, the percentages are 16% for residential, commercial, institutional land uses, and 12% for industrial uses. Staff also looked at some of the successes and barriers to tree preservation within the county. So I know at the meeting that we had.
Back up for a second.
I'll try. How can you do that?
So you kind of told us what's in the Brevard County tree preservation standards. Is this just extracted from the code? Have you actually talked to the people who administer the ordinance over in Brevard County?
I did have a discussion with one of the lead permitters within the Natural Resources Department who's responsible for reviewing the mass grading permits and so.
And then why, when a few slides ago you said, well, we looked at Alachua County, we looked at Brevard, we looked at Collier, but you've only chosen to present us with what Brevard does. There's like no comparison or contrast to what the other two that you looked at did.
So we felt that Brevard, how it's laid out, it's simplest to address the concerns that were previously raised by Planning Commission in terms of avoiding or reducing clear cutting. This is part of an ongoing study that we're doing to collect this information. So we can also reach out to those communities to see how exactly the implementation of their code works. But we focus on Brevard because it felt like this one was most aligned with the initial instructions that we were provided by this board.
Okay.
So we looked at longleaf, and what we found was that the existing topography provided favorable conditions in terms of wetland protections. So this map just shows the Cat 1, 2, and 3 wetlands that are on the site, and you can see where the development is relative to those. And the project also maximized planting opportunities for street trees. So those two things in combination led to a lot of trees being on the site currently. I also included an aerial here. I believe this one is from 1951. And you can see from where the lot lines are that essentially it was around the densely forested areas. So they basically built in the more open spaces. Now, for some of the barriers that we identified due to our discussions with the development community, the first thing that came up was in terms of trees needing to be aesthetically pleasing when they're being preserved in order for them to stay on the development pad and not be clear cut. Now, what happens in some situations from what we've discussed is that sometimes trees in densely forested areas, their response to insufficient light results in them growing taller without having a whole lot of branching and leaves happening. So then when you try to preserve those trees, aesthetically they're not very pleasing versus a tree that has enough space and was sufficiently managed so that it's able to develop fully laterally as well as vertically. Tree surveys can also be useful to identify trees that are worth saving, but in areas where the understory is overgrown, it becomes cost prohibitive, especially for trees that are less than 15 inches in diameter. Mr. Moody, I do believe you mentioned this at the last workshop. Grades and the resulting fill, those pose conflicts to retaining trees within the development pad. And essentially, appropriate drainage would need to be required if the trees are not at grade. And roundabouts, buffers, and other features are potentially good places to save trees at grade. However, there is some regulatory ambiguity within the requirements for the preserved trees that are to be used for buffer requirements within our code. So that was something that was expressed to us as well. And irrigation can also become an issue if you're trying to irrigate an area that's existing with trees versus trying to replant and have the associated irrigation be available to it.
So this buffer requirement, are you referring to a buffer along a main road? So,
all the buffer requirements that are currently in the landscaping code.
okay.
So the last thing that we explored was density bonus ideas. We are still trying to get some research on this. So for example, when we looked at Brevard County, they did have requirements for maintaining the tree canopies and contiguous tracks, like I mentioned before. There is a reduction in the requirement, but there isn't necessarily a density bonus associated with it. And communities, for example, like Collier County, they have a density bonus, but it's for things like wetlands. So these are some ideas that we had, essentially inherently forested parcels that retain at least 50% of the existing tree canopy as conserved land or in conservation easements that we can offer them a density bonus. And then in areas that tree stands are preserved, potentially consisting of heritage trees, that those sites would also be able to request a density bonus. And we would want to scale that. So for parcels, let's say, for example, larger than 100 acres, for each subsequent 100 acres, we'd want to have additional requirements as to how many of those tree stands they would need to preserve in order to be eligible to request that density bonus. And that is the end of my summary that I have here. Of course, I'm available for any questions that you may have.
One of the biggest objections that we seem to hear about is when you drive along a main corridor and the trees are cut right up to the road. It seems like there needs to be some density of trees along that main corridor so that it really doesn't change the character of the drive. And so, I'd like to make sure that's addressed, because the prime example is the one that happened on Little Road, between Flat and Decubulus. We've got a lot of backlash about the way they did that. So,
right.
I'd like to, and they're going to be doing the same thing on Rowan Road. I don't know if we can control that, but we need to think about that for this future ordinance. I think. Anybody disagree? Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, because it just ruins the ambience of the drive. So.
Yeah, I made a couple of questions here for you. First, on that resolution that was approved or adopted, is there, it doesn't look like there's any, is that effective immediately?
So the resolution is effective immediately. Section 1 of the resolution, however, is going to be effective upon the repeal of Section 802.3C1B38D of the LDC. So that's that last sentence within the first paragraph of Section 1, which is going to be the amendment that we're going to be bringing to you on the 21st for consideration to remove the sections that are referenced here.
So projects that are already in review in the development department, until they get their approval, their rates aren't set?
That
So
is
you could
a
have a
question I'll
project
defer to David
that's-
to answer.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think that's pretty penal. We've got some big projects that are nice projects that we've really asked people, and people have put their neck on the line to come to Pasco County and develop these projects, and we're getting ready to hit them with a pretty substantial financial hit if that's in fact the way this is approved. It's almost like a bait and switch to somebody. You got, pretty big hit to people that they're not even aware of. That's just my personal feeling. Also on while we're talking about the trees, and is there anything that could be done, or was there anybody that gave like some kind of incentive? Because I hear and I see projects all the time that, Chuck referenced the example on Little Road because we drive by it every day, and I think a lot of people drive by it every day. But it's happening throughout the county, and what you end up is people, they clear and just mass clear all these big parcels, and then they put in these little dinky 2-inch trees. Is there anybody that you've seen in research that like gives some kind of incentive or something for somebody to come in and put maybe bigger trees so you get something closer to what they took down?
I've seen that, but not necessarily in terms of a density bonus, but there is some credit that's offset depending on how large the trees are that you put in.
So this goes way back to the early 2004 or 5 time frame when we first had the big major revision to the landscape code. And one of the things that was in that first rework of the landscape code was that replant trees had to have a 3-inch caliper. Whereas prior it was only 1.5 inches or 2 inches, I don't remember the number. But one of the problems that was experienced was that there was not a readily available stock
Supply.
of trees that size. And I don't know what the status of that is today, but I can only imagine, given the amount of development that's happened since COVID times, that probably the landscape stock of live oaks and magnolias and that is pretty well depleted, and I bet
Sure.
the nurseries are having a hard time keeping up. You know, it takes a while to grow a tree in a nursery, and when the developers have to buy them by the hundreds or the thousands, that eats into the stock. So I'm not sure that those nurseries can actually produce the larger trees that
Well, and I don't necessarily know that a
in the
developer,
time needed.
I don't know if a developer would necessarily choose that option. I just think a lot of times, especially in key corridors or key areas where we look, I mean, use Longleaf as an example. I mean, sure, Longleaf, when you drive down those streets today, those trees have been in place for 25 years. Those trees look nice, but they looked a whole lot different when they were planted as 2-inch trees.
The other thing I would tell you is that we need to look at some of our landscaping regulations, and I don't know whether we're still using AI to review landscape plans, but I tell you a story of something that happened to me on a recent project. We attempted to save a large tree that would probably qualify as a heritage tree under this resolution that fell in a buffer area along a side lot line. But the code says that in that type of buffer, there needed to be a continuous row of evergreen shrubs. And our landscape architect showed the tree to be preserved and then did not show shrubs being planted under the drip line of the tree because they didn't want to dig through the roots of the tree and kill the tree. And unfortunately, the only way I got the plan approved was to show the removal of what would be a heritage tree under this resolution and the planting of a 2-inch tree and a grow of evergreen shrubs, because AI doesn't have common sense, or somebody in the staff didn't have common sense. And I will tell staff, I'll warn you, we're going to deal with this later because I told the contractor not to take the tree out. So we'll circle back to that, but we need to have some flexibility in the review of plans to recognize that when a developer is going out of their way to save a tree, not to let the code get in the way of them saving the tree.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sure.
It's a good point. Back to your point, Jamie, I think it is worth considering, at least giving some offset or something if they do bigger trees.
So somebody has the option, and maybe it's just, that might not be an inch for inch option. I mean, you gotta do something to incentivize somebody for restoring what they're taking down and getting something better, because there's a lot of development going on, and the sooner we can get it more presentable, the better.
I know staff chose to present the Brevard County idea, and I would be interested if staff would present us with some analysis of the other counties. I'm hesitant. In the very first draft of this tree ordinance that happened a year plus ago and was presented to the horizontal roundtable, there was all kinds of millions of pages of computations that were going to be required to determine what your tree liability was and the rating of all of these trees. And in the presentation you just made, one of the things that turns me off about it is, again, these some crazy formula requires all kinds of rating and evaluation on trees known and unknown, and I'd like to have something that is simple and easy to administer. And I will tell you, and I'd like to know more about what Alachua County does. The bullet point that caught me the most when you presented that was they require you to preserve 20% of the trees. Okay, that's a simple thing. We can all understand this. I don't need an arborist out there. I've got a stand of trees that's 5 acres. I'm going to preserve 1 acre of those trees in some form or fashion. 20% is an easy calculation. We drive up the costs on our developers to do the tree surveys, I'm looking at the new resolution. This defines a heritage tree, and then it says, but it has to be rated in good quality or whatever by the International Society of Arborists method. Well, now that means I gotta go retain an arborist to go run around on this site and go look at all of these trees to determine the rating. And I'm spending a whole lot of money in paperwork and that I'd rather spend planting trees just to demonstrate compliance. I would like something that's simple.
And we can do that additional research. I wanted to go back to something that Mr. Girardi mentioned regarding the size of the trees being replanted. That was part of the discussions that we had with the development committee as well. And from what I understand, there is a difference in cost, not necessarily linear one, it's actually exponential, between planting, let's say, a 2-inch tree versus planting a 6-inch tree. So it does impact that cost for them as well if they size up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think there's the benefit to the county to consider some kind of incentive to offset that
Sure.
nonlinear increase in cost.
What you're saying is if they're willing to plant a 6-inch tree, I'm going to reduce either the mitigation
Sure.
payment and or your tree planting requirement or some type of offset, sure.
Trees over 6 inches are counted as 12.
Because our goal is to have.
I think what Jamie's
nicer
saying is you need
trees
to give
sooner.
some credit for quality,
Yeah,
not
right.
quantity.
Yeah, because I mean, I agree. I mean, the developer's never, it's not linear. I mean, they're never going to choose to go that route if there's not an incentive there.
And I also think Jamie had a good point about the existing applications. I think it's difficult to justify basically having a contract with a developer to develop a property and then now going back and saying, well, we had a contract to do this, you knew what it was gonna cost, but now we're gonna change it. So it's sort of a one-sided deal. And, you know, I think we need to give that some thought too. I think we need to, you know, maybe exempt properties that are already in the pipeline. You know, as much as I would hate to do that, I still think it's fair. Because, you know, I put myself in that position. If I was developing a piece of property and I had already analyzed my cost and the county had, you know, it was on, and I'm in the pipeline expected to be approved, suddenly I get hit with a, you know, $500,000 additional cost for some reason, you know, that wasn't part of my original agreement with the county. I don't think that's fair. So, you know, I just think we need to give that part some consideration. How do you all feel about it here on the board?
Yeah, I think people have, as David has said up here multiple times, there needs to be a predictable process.
Right.
I don't think you can change the rules in the middle of the game.
All right.
So, a couple points. One is that it's going to be hard for you to change in a resolution that's already been adopted, but it probably is something that can be addressed when the repeal of section 802.3C1B comes to you on the 21st. But more importantly, this definition of somebody that's already in the pipeline is a continuum. Okay, so we need to be more specific about what you're talking about. Normally, for example, we wouldn't exempt somebody just because they had a zoning approval. You know, if you're talking about somebody who's already got a preliminary site plan approval, you know, there's already done their tree survey, like it's already invested their money in the tree mitigation rules that exist
Now.
now, that might make some sense, but just because somebody happened to have a MPD zoning, that wouldn't make as much sense.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So you need
with
to figure out
that.
where that line is that you're going to vest. But normally we wouldn't do that unless somebody had invested money in actual site plan approval.
Right.
To,
Because we realize some people get property zoned even if they're not going to develop.
so
it right
I
away.
don't, and maybe staff has some thoughts on that, and maybe somebody who's already submitted their tree survey. I don't know where in the continuum that line makes sense, but that's kind of probably a staff question to know where.
Well, how do the engineers feel? They deal with this all the time.
Well, I mean, I think at a minimum, it's got to be at site plan submittal. I mean, they're grandfathered in at site plan submittal.
I would agree.
So,
I will tell
Let
you,
me ask you a question. When you submit your site plan, is that when you submit your tree survey?
yes.
And wildlife surveys, you're required to at that point.
David?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable, that the site plan submittal should be the grandfathering stage, because that's when the engineering and all the civil design is done. There's a confluence of views about when we should implement these new fees.
Right.
One side of the argument is we should stage and phase from the people that are economically impacted. The other side of the argument is, for the proponents of canopy preservation, is our fees have been too low for over a decade, and we have to step up and provide immediate relief to get the fees up to a level that's acceptable. So I think the site plan idea is a good idea.
I know I'll be odd man out for saying this.
What's that?
I know I'll be odd man out for saying this, but there's been a significant amount of inflation since the first tree ordinance, so that $50 an inch when that was adopted was worth a lot more than the $50 is today. But at the end of the day, fees for trees is an approach that has proven not to work. It hasn't stopped anybody from cutting down trees. And I said this before, at the end of the day, if I make the cost of cutting down this tree 50% more, but the lot is worth 20 or 50 times more than the value of cutting down that tree, the tree's going to lose every time. So I'm not sure that that approach works. That's why I'm more personally leaning more towards an approach of preserving stands of trees, or a certain percentage of the stands of trees, because we have to make a recognition that there are other sections of the code that force us into practices which are going to kill the trees. So I'd rather preserve a section of a parcel. And the other thing that I'm not pleased with, and I'm sorry that the board chose to do this, is to remove the cap. I think that creates a certain unfairness to parcels which are wooded, that may be in prime locations for development. You've now made developing those parcels less financially feasible because there's no cap on the tree mitigation. And I would tell you this, if I were a landowner that had a heavily forested piece of property with trees, I'd probably go have my land declared as a tree farm, and then as I'm planning on selling this later off, I'd harvest my trees. And I don't think that that's going to result in what you want. What this is going to do is this drives you out to buy rangeland and ranch land.
Well, I don't think you're the odd man out, sir. I think you're spot on about the cost of monetary inflation. Number two, any implementation of any ordinance, it's not perfect.
Well,
And I think, no, I'm not arguing with you. I think, there has been some input from leadership that we don't want to just raise the fees and have business as usual where projects pencil out and we're still promoting clear cutting as an alternative. We want to incentivize using higher fees to preserve trees. But I think your discussion is a calibration discussion and a variation between property and land, and I think we should look into that.
Yeah, I mean, we have different ecosystems throughout the county. The middle of our county is low, has traditionally been used for cattle grazing, whereas some of the other properties that were citrus groves, those have been cleared from agriculture. And then there are other places where we have natural stands of forest, but maybe in locations where we're looking to develop or redevelop, and that creates a patent unfairness. So I'm not sure removing the cap was a wise idea. I think that's going to inhibit some of our growth prospects in the area.
Well, you're right. You're right that there are differences and variances with properties as we review these development applications. The idea of removal of the cap is that We didn't want to say, well, you know, the cap now it's $3,500 an acre, but it's still good enough to pencil out for a project, and they're back to business as usual and not preserving trees. But I think we should have a variance and maybe institute some type of capping mechanism to be suitable for different types of properties.
At the risk of sounding combative, and I don't mean to be, I don't think land developers get up in the morning. I can assure you, because I've been doing this a long time, they don't get up in the morning and say, how many trees can I kill today? In fact, they pay money to remove trees. We have other regulations that force the removal of the tree. And I'm not sure, we can't go in and tell people, well, don't fill your land to prevent flooding and promote stormwater drainage. These are the things that kill the trees. We have to make a recognition of that. And that's why I'm more towards preservation and clustering. And I said it in here before when we had the tree workshop. I think there's too much focus on saving an individual tree. In my mind, it's better to save canopies of trees. That's why I was very interested to see what Alachua County was doing. It's for the environment, it's beneficial to save a large canopy versus just one tree somewhere.
Well, those counties that Amanda just reviewed with you, we decided to use the 5 most rapidly growing counties in the state because it's similar to us versus looking at Pinellas, which is fully built out, or other counties. So that's why it's a good idea to drill down on all the counties and see what they're doing and what the implementation benefits are, and also the hurdles and the difficulties administrating that. And I think we can deal with the ideas here. I've been taking copious notes. We can focus on the tree protection side and how these fees and how these considerations of the uniqueness of property, the conflicts in our ordinance dealing with the civil design, drainage, buffering, and the uniqueness of property all relate to the collection of these fees. And it's all good information and gives us a lot of ideas to work with. So the whole idea is to get, we were forecasting and getting back to the board in September with a tree protection ordinance. Obviously, there's more work to be done, so we're deferring it to October. And what I'd like to do is keep continuing this process. I think the Planning Commission may want to invite some stakeholders in that have the focus on the business side, and then come back and give you a revised draft, and then we can proceed on that basis.
So I'm believing some of those stakeholders are sitting over here because I continue to see them nodding up and down. Do they get a chance to?
Well, that's up to the planning.
Talk to us here.
When at the last Planning Commission, I asked you if I could invite the TBBA, and you were
Yes.
very gracious. So that's really up to the commission and the chair as to how we're going to interface with them.
Yeah, we're going to give them a chance to
Yeah.
ask questions or
Great.
suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, is that all on the tree ordinance?
Yes, that's the end of my
Okay,
presentation.
let me, I think probably now is the appropriate time to see if there's anybody in the audience that's here to speak on or ask
Can I
questions
two
about.
quick questions real quick before we do
Yeah,
that?
sure, absolutely.
As you're expanding research to other counties, I think it'd be good to find out how effective they think it's been, just from that standpoint. And then, I don't know if there's a designation within those ordinances, or if we should look at a wetland versus upland tree. We've got a lot of cypress heads that are gonna be wetlands that are protected in the wetlands, so.
Yeah, they're already
something to
protected,
count
yeah.
towards
Yeah.
tree preservation portion, so. Just
Right.
Interesting.
Good idea, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, did you understood what he was just saying,
Yes.
right? Okay, thank you. All right, so I know we have some people here that want to give us some input, so who would like to be first to come up? If you just give your name and address when you come up. This isn't sworn testimony, so.
Good morning. Matt Suggs with Tampa Bay Builders Association, 4056 Crescent Park Drive, Riverview. Want to appreciate you guys inviting us and allowing us to come speak. First of all, Tampa Bay Builders Association does support and has supported an increase to the tree fees. Most developers and builders see trees as a benefit and an amenity to a community. part of the process, working with staff on this over, I'd say, the last 7 or 8 months, is finding a balance between incentive without snuffing out the ability to continue to grow and provide affordable housing. One of the things that we were really hopeful to see in this ordinance was a cap at a reasonable level that would provide that balance between incentive and the ability to develop these lands that do require higher floodplain base elevations, floodplain comp ponds, things that unlock the potential to provide affordable housing and communities, but also the ability to save trees. So I think we're coming here today to ask you guys to consider a cap that's reasonable. And part of what we wanted to highlight is when looking at other municipalities, Hillsborough is a great example. They've implemented a tree ordinance. They've been able to administer that. And it seems to be successful. When looking at these fee increases without the cap, there's some pretty astronomical numbers when you get to projects like you were saying, Mr. Moody, that are more densely treed. And once you've accommodated for the fill and the floodplain comp, there's not as many opportunities to save the trees in those areas that require the fill or require the floodplain comp. So looking at projects that, if you've maximized your efforts to save trees, tree wells, pulling back your silt fence lines everywhere you can, the increases are significant. And Garrett's here. He's a landscape architect in town, also part of the Tampa Bay Builders Association. And he can kind of speak to a little bit more between what we're looking at here versus what Hillsborough does, which is probably one of the more comparable in size. I don't know if you guys have any specific questions.
Well, my question is you're alluding to the fee cap. What do you think the cap should be?
So one of the things that we right off the bat kind of established with staff was grandfathering was not going to be on the table. I think you guys had great points on that. We'd love to see some sort of grandfathering given people that have made significant investments in projects. But understanding that that was not going to be something that would be considered, we started talking about a cap. So currently the per lot is $500 per lot. Totally agree that that's been low for too long, needs to be increased to create that incentive. We felt that $3,500 per upland developable acre was a happy medium that struck the balance between incentive versus allowing these developments to still be feasible. And I think to support that, some of the numbers that Garrett has based on his analysis and the team's analysis on, even with the cap, there's still a tremendous amount of incentive to save trees. And for the instances where that starts to weigh the other way, the cap provides the ability to still continue with the project and afford that, or provide that affordable housing.
Can I ask you a question?
John, go ahead.
How would you feel about a system that encouraged you to cluster the development? For instance, will allow you to develop on smaller lots, more concentrated in an area for the purposes of preserving these tree canopies, which then that reduces the amount of area which you're draining and have to provide stormwater, and in turn the amount of floodplain encroachment and compensation that's required, which are things that are historically causing large numbers of trees to have to be removed. I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been getting at with staff about it, some kind of density bonus for preservation of the trees.
That is something that we supported. When that initial draft came out you alluded to that had all the calculations, those type of ideas were supported. And the second part of kind of what we're wondering is what the timing is of that portion of the ordinance on administering it, because there's the current LDC that governs the inch diameter and when you start to mitigate things like that. But I think understanding that component of it could strike some balance with the fee increase. I think working on that, and staff's been great and open with us and working through that. It seems that was put somewhat on hold while the fee increase was focused on. And so we're definitely interested in participating in that, in creating that ordinance, and we would be interested in some sort of scenario where clustering trees would help provide and boost the incentive. And I think Garrett can probably speak a little bit more to that, because this is his day-to-day. I'm not an engineer, so I'll admit that. But
Mr. Suggs, you are correct. We've bifurcated the process. We've done the fees first because that was a burning priority from our leadership. So the planning, Board of County Commissioners pulled me up about a month and a half ago to the rostrum at a regular meeting. They said, you know, we want to get this pre-protection initiative completed and adopted. So they asked, when are we going to see it? And we said September. And now, you know, as I reported to the Planning Commission, we realize there's more work to be done. So we're targeting the BCC in October. So we're going to take all the input today. The team is going to sit down and revise and update the draft, and then we will collaborate with you on it, so you'll have ample time to have a discussion with us.
we definitely appreciate
And
that.
we also, might I add, we've set up a meeting with TBBA to meet with Chairman Starkey, and that's on the August agenda too. So that'll be a very meaningful discussion.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Could I just add one comment, which
Sure,
is,
Dan.
I do think that, and I'm happy for them to provide comments to you all, but the issue about the cap on the fees is really something that should be addressed to the Board of County Commissioners rather than the Planning Commission, because the board has already acted on this resolution. Now, the effective date of this increase is somewhat in the purview of the Planning Commission because it's not effective until we amend the code. So that's something they do have some say over, but I don't think they can impose a cap when the board said no cap. I mean, they're subservient to the board. So
Right.
I think you need to direct that comment about the desire for a cap to the Board of County Commissioners. They have somewhat limited authority on that issue.
Right, and we would intend to do that. We just wanted to kind of explain our logic and thought process on what we were hoping to see and versus what was ultimately presented.
David, I think we recognize we're a recommending body, and should the planning commission decide to make a recommendation to the board, regarding a cap, I don't see anything.
I mean, when
wrong
that
with they can
ordinance,
choose to
when the
go with it or
effective,
not.
yeah, when the ordinance that strips out the existing fees from the code comes to you, if you want to put a sort of a side recommendation that they consider a cap, you can do that, but you can't take an action that's inconsistent with this is somewhat unusual because the board's already acted on this issue. Normally, you're dealing with ordinances before the board has acted. They've already acted here. So that's what limits your authority somewhat.
I understand.
Yeah, and you guys had discussed potentially site plan submittal as a somewhat of a grandfathering. I mean, we would totally support that given the economic impact of somebody that's committed to something.
Right.
So we appreciate your consideration of that. But
Yeah.
in the effort of coordinating with staff on the tree ordinance going forward that will govern how this is administered from a diameter and a specimen and a process, if you wouldn't mind, I'd just like Garrett just to kind of run through just some of our findings, just so we're all kind of understanding apples to apples on what other counties do versus what we're looking to do here.
Sure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Garrett Noble. I'm landscape architect at Clearview Land Design, 3010 West Azeel Street, Tampa. So one of the big differences that I noticed with the current the board resolution really is with Pasco tree mitigation, the inches start at 10 inches for mitigation. A big comparison with Hillsborough County, Hillsborough starts at 24 inches. As you can imagine, the difference between the number of trees that you would have between 10 and 24 and starting at 24 and greater, you're gonna have a lot more trees. So we did a little bit of an analysis comparing basically the code recommendation, the 75 per inch with no cap, comparing that to Hillsborough County. Basically the increase that we were seeing, so if you compared a couple of different projects, we had one that was $350,000 at the 500 per lot basis, the original Pasco code. Without the cap, with the $75 per inch, we had one project that was $7.4 million. If we did a $3,500 per developable acre cap, that fee would be $1.2 million. So that obviously significantly reduces the fee without a cap. Then you compare that to Hillsborough County. That same project would be $901,000. So, you know, in that project, it's fairly consistent. If we had a cap on the mitigation fees, it would be fairly consistent with Hillsborough County. But there are other projects. We've got one. So at a 500 per lot cap, one project was $135,000. With the new proposal, or with the new resolution, $257,000. With a cap, $387,000. And then comparing that to Hillsborough County, that same project would be $66,000 in mitigation fees. So in that case, Hillsborough is, to begin with, less than what the original Pasco code was. So, you know, Hillsborough County was brought up as a good comparison for, you know, they've got a good tree code, let's try to follow what they're doing. But that significant difference there is, here we're gonna have to mitigate in Pasco, we're gonna have to mitigate between 10 and 24 inch trees. Hillsborough is 24 inches and greater. Significant difference there. One other difference is Hillsborough does not require, or Hillsborough does not allow an exemption for palms or pines, whereas Pasco does, except for longleaf. So that might be something to consider, that maybe we would have to mitigate for palms and pines if the inch threshold could be increased. Because if we start at 10 inches, we have no cap, and we increase this fee, some projects are not gonna make sense anymore. And then to Matt's point, you know, and to several of your points, if you bring this in late in the game, some projects financially, you know, a developer may have set a pro forma up on a project, and financially the project no longer makes sense. So I think these are some things that we definitely need to consider. You know, there's different ways that we do it. It's either, you know, we have a cap like we just talked about, or maybe we discuss changing the threshold for when we start to mitigate, you know, for the trees that we're removing.
Okay. Let me ask you these. What things do you think you can do in design to preserve trees? Like I said, personally speaking, I don't think the monetary approach has worked, other than we built a giant bank account of a tree fund, and I don't know what we've done with this money. I heard Commissioner Starkey one day, and this is a couple of years ago at a board meeting, asked to please have the county building over in Newport Richey landscaped with some of those trees so that it at least met our own tree code, and it's yet to be done. But so I'm not sure having money in the bank solves any practical problems of trees, but what do you think could be done in the code to encourage designs which save trees?
It's tough because whenever you're setting up a site plan, you know, it's hard to dictate that with code, I guess, is more of what I'm going to try to say is it's hard to set up LDC requirements. I mean, you know, one thing you might be able to do is, you know, maybe a certain percentage of your parks that you're required to have, maybe those need to have some stands of trees, or you need to preserve 20% of your total park acreage in tree preservation if there are trees on the site. Some sites don't have trees. That could be a way to do it. You know, the density bonus idea, that's an idea, but really, at the end of the day, it's from the initial site planning perspective, setting up a good site plan to preserve some trees.
And so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know how this works. I have developers, they come to my office, I start with a boundary survey of the property, and then it's a game of how much can I get on this property, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, what I'm asking is, what kinds of things do you think we could put in our code so that when we're doing these initial conceptual development plans, that we're giving thought to preserving substantive stands of trees?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about trying to save individual trees, and I think we better watch what we wish for. We'd have neighborhoods with 100 tree wells and, 4-foot differences in grade across lots, where you went out of the way to save one tree that has very little ecological value, where I can save a habitat over here in a corner of the development or make it part of the parkland. I like that idea. That's what I'm trying to get at. We want to encourage designs which preserve habitat, not just one tree because it arbitrarily is this size.
Yeah, one of the things we looked at that could be considered is some type of bonus for locating the required park space within an area that has viable, healthy specimen trees. I mean, that could be something that creates a benefit to the community, to the county, to the developer, to the future homeowner, to the, everybody. So maybe if there's an opportunity to do that, that creates, looking at more of the incentive rather than the punishment side. It's, incentivizing the park's location in the most, heavily treated area or the best specimen trees or whatever that is. That's something that we could definitely look at.
I like it.
Look at sites that have gone through the process and say, could these have been placed in a better area? And so we'd be open to that discussion and looking at that.
Yeah, and one thing, the example we were looking at earlier, I think it was Brevard County, with their code, they had a percentage that you had to maintain of your tree canopy. Maybe that's something to look at. Maybe you have to preserve 10% of the tree canopy on the project, on the site. It's a simple way to accomplish a goal and not make it overly complicated, because I think that was one of the challenges with some of the initial LDC drafts. It was so complicated that, the spreadsheets and the formulas and a lot of room for error. So keeping it simple is definitely a way to do that. And, maybe that is a percentage of the canopy that we preserve or a percentage of the trees.
I think the percentage idea is a much simpler path to follow. However, I also would want to make sure that we have a place where we can preserve the century oaks and magnolias and things like that. And I realize that it's better to have a stand of trees than one tree. But I also know that, you have a beautiful tree that has been there for 150 years. I think we don't want to cut those down. And we need to disincentivize people from cutting them down. And I think those are the things that most people object to, when they see developments. And so I think, it's sort of a combination of things that you could do, the percentage, but also you pay attention to the century trees and things like that.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that we could look at would be with those trees, maybe instead of disincentivizing or punishing the development community for removing those trees, making, a positive spin, incentivizing that and saying, okay, if you do save this live oak that's a 40-inch live oak, or maybe set some threshold for that, then there's even more of a benefit to the developer for saving that tree. And maybe it's not just...
That's what I was getting at. Okay, and I understand this. I've got to drain streets and lots, and then I've got a 52-inch oak tree that's at grade, and I'm planning on filling around it. Well, that means I'm going to have to keep a buffer area around this tree, which is a lot they can't develop. But I would be in favor of saying, okay, well, if you can go in and save these big trees, instead of this 45-foot lot, I'll let you have some 41-foot, 40-foot lots or 38-foot lots or whatever it may be to make up for that lost ground to save that tree. That's what I was getting about the clustering and density bonus. I know we've established some minimums. Don't get offended by this, but in my personal preference, we'd start at 60-foot lots, and then when you saved all the trees in the wetlands, we'd get you the 45-foot lots or the 40-foot lots. But they've already made the decision that 45 is the baseline, but I'd be willing to give you down to 40 or 35 or whatever it may be to incentivize you to go in and save these trees. We recognize that this is going to be a loss of developable property. So, okay, how can we make it back up on the other end?
Yeah, and there may be some cases, though, that you may have some projects that the developer doesn't want the higher density. Maybe they want a lower density project. They want the 60-foot lots, not the 35s and 40s, so it's hard to paint with a broad brush.
Where are those guys?
Very rare, very rare.
I'm trying to remember the last time we had an R4 Euclidean zoning
Yeah.
application come in here.
Totally understand, just,
I haven't seen any 1 acre lots come in here since I've been back here, but.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, any other questions? All right. Anybody else like to speak?
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, Mr. Chair, you still have 2 other items on your workshop agenda, so.
Move it along.
This is
Yeah.
important.
I understand it's important, I'm just saying, don't forget you have 2 other items.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry,
What time
your
is it?
time's
Is
up.
it still morning? Good morning. My name is Angela Halber. I'm also here with TBVA today. I just wanted the point that Garrett started making to not be lost here, because he made a lot of great points. The development design standards should be incentivized. That's something that is, the corridor preservation, the thoughtful design, all of those things should absolutely be incentivized in any way that the county can. But the main primary point is that the factor, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a lawyer. I'm bad at math, which goes without saying. What I can tell you is that if you change one number in an equation, then the whole number ends up different. And what Garrett's point is that because the threshold in Hillsborough County is different, it throws the whole equation off by an order of magnitude. So you go from $1.2 million to $7 million. That's not significant. That's eye-popping, in my opinion. And it should be in yours as well, from what I can tell. So again, I think one thing that was missing in the presentation from staff, which was an excellent presentation, they didn't show all the factors that go into the final equation as a straight line comparison. They didn't show the starting point for where the tree mitigation begins. And I think any fair analysis, apples to apples, of what the end result is going to be, needs to include how trees are calculated, including that starting point. So that's, what I have to say.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Nancy Hayeswood, 34110, a nice place. I'm an ordinary person here.
I don't know about that.
Well, yeah. You've got some rough choices to make. You're trying to balance what is best for Hall, Pasco County with what the development community wants for your county. So I'm here to maybe put in the other side of it. I grew up in Hillsborough County. I don't want us to look like Hillsborough County, thank you. We don't need more asphalt. We've got plenty of it right now. Now, I will say in Hillsborough County's favor, I think it's New Tampa, there's a Lowe's there that's got a little wetland that was saved. And that Lowe's put in a lot of trees in their parking lot. And I've seen other places in Tampa where they did put in their commercial and save their wetlands. So that was okay, but the rest of it, I don't think so. Mr. Moody, your clustering ideas, I hate clustering, but that's only in the rural area plan. I thought that was a good idea, but let's not spread out, let's build up, maybe, instead of more asphalt out, and save the wetlands there for that. So I actually like that, just not in the rural area. So those are basically my thoughts on it. Please do keep your citizens in mind that really have enough building. They're suffering with the traffic. They see all these trees clear cut down and what's left every time we drive through. And I know y'all do too. So thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay, did we give everybody a chance? All right. Is there a motion to be made, or a recommendation?
You would not make motions at a workshop.
Just a recommendation?
This is just a
Okay.
discussion item for you.
Okay.
The future changes, as Amanda said, will be brought to you at future planning commission
Okay.
regularly scheduled meetings.
David?
Well, the morning is just flowing along.
Yes.
The next topic is to discuss the Pasco 2050 Pasco Lives chapter, and then following that, Pasco Plays. We've had some internal stakeholder invitations, people, because this has been a collaborative effort to draft these chapters, and we have subject matter experts that may be able to ask questions or answer questions that arise. So I'm going to introduce Terry Pitos. He's our Planning Services Director, and he's the Pasco 2050 lead. Thank you.
Okay, Terry.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Nectarios Pitos, Planning Development, Economic Growth Department. Thank you, Mr. Engel. I'm Planning Services Director within the PDE. Today's Local Planning Agency Comprehensive Plan Update session will focus on the Pasco 2050 chapter, Pasco Lives, which is the housing element of the updated comprehensive plan. This chapter, like all the chapters of the comprehensive plan, have been worked on by numerous industry-related stakeholders, the county attorney's office and the county departments, including in this case by the Community Development Department, which was a significant participant contributor to the development of the chapter. In addition to this, the Planning Development Economic Growth Department facilitated the reviews for community development and industry-related stakeholders in order to capture their input and facilitate the development of the draft. Moreover, we received significant community stakeholder feedback on the question of housing needs within the county through thousands of public comments and surveys via the Pasco 2050 project website, as well as over 10 community workshops and open houses across the county over the last 2 years. We're presenting the Pasco Lives chapter today, though our plan is not to go line by line through the chapter, but to present the big ideas for the chapter and provide you all with an overview of new policies that were added to the proposed comprehensive plan update. And with me today is Hayat Mazzilli, the senior planner with Planning Services, who is the project manager for the comprehensive plan update. She will walk us through the chapter overview presentation. You have with you in your materials the draft chapter, a redline version of it, I believe, the policy change tables that illustrate the various edits made in Pasco 2050 as compared against the current comprehensive plan, and the data and analysis information that supports the goals, objectives, and policies of the proposed chapter. If there are any questions or comments, we will be available for discussion, of course. And with that, I'll hand the baton over to Terry for the presentation.
Question real quick.
Mm-hmm.
You said we're not going to do this line by line, and I understand we have a limited amount of
Yeah.
time. But at the end of the day, this document is all about what's in it, and the words matter. So the question that I have is, when are we going to go through the words? Because I got a whole bunch of highlights and questions about the words.
Yeah.
And what do these things actually mean? And
Right.
I also have some questions about the words too, so.
Yes, so what I meant is that we're not going to go line by line in our presentation, but to the extent that there's questions in particular on specific policies, yes, of course, we'll hit those policies and have a discussion.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Terry.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. Hayat Mazzilli, Planning Development Economic Growth. Okay, so as Terry mentioned, today I will give an overview of the amendments that were made to Pasco Lives, which is the housing element of the Pasco 2050 comprehensive plan. Just to note, there are 11 chapters in the comprehensive plan. We will be bringing you these chapters in the upcoming weeks. So we'll kick it off with Pasco Lives. So like I mentioned, Pasco Lives is the housing element of the comprehensive plan. We renamed it Lives, which stands for a renewed focus on housing diversity and quality of life in Pasco County. This chapter or this element is mandatory It addresses the requirement outlined in Chapter 163 of the Florida statutes. It provides an outline of the housing strategy for our county to meet the housing needs of our growing population, of course, build a well-balanced and inclusive community, and provide a diverse mix of housing types for all income levels, well, to serve all income levels and also to support different lifestyles. So what did we change? We have reorganized and streamlined the GOPs to be easier to navigate. We have done some general housekeeping to improve clarity and compliance. So we've made edits per Florida statutes, we revised the wording, again, for more conciseness, and we removed repetitive policies and also policies that have already been completed. And of course, there were some renumbering due to reorganization. The Pasco Lives includes 1 goal, 5 objectives, and 47 policies, 16 of which are brand new. And these goals, objectives, and policies align with the finding of 2 planning housing studies that were going on at the time we were working on this chapter, including the USF Housing Needs Study, as well as the Inclusionary Zoning Ordinance Study.
Hi, can I ask you a question on that last bullet?
Yes, sir.
Who determined that it's consistent with the current studies that we're doing? Because I found some inconsistencies. I'm trying to figure out, should I be addressing those to you or to community development? I'm not sure who was responsible for that last bullet.
The staff, we have reviewed the findings with County Attorney's Office, and we've just ensured that the new policies actually reflect what the findings from those 2 studies were.
Okay, I don't think they do, but we'll get to that.
Sure, we can discuss those. So. Yes, no problem. Any more questions before I move to the next chapter or the next slide? No?
Nope.
Okay, so this slide right here, I know it's a lot, but these are the 16 new policies or the proposed new policies for Pasco Lives. So we're introducing a comprehensive set of new housing policies designed to address the county's growing and changing housing needs. Let me break it down, a few key elements here or key themes that you will see on here. So first, we are encouraging residential densities and diverse housing types with policies like 1.1, 1.1.1, 1.1.1.4, and 1.1.5. Policies like 1.2.1 through 1.2.13 are all about expanding affordable housing, whether through incentives, fee reductions, and also coordination and partnerships with developers and other local housing agencies. We're also addressing implementation and access through inclusionary zoning program, and that's policy 1.2.10. Financial assistance, policy 1.3.1, and housing improvement programs, policies 1.4.3, and policy 1.4.4, and 1.4.11. Okay. So some of the new policies that we just looked at on the previous slide are, and also other updated existing policies in the chapter, were not developed in isolation. They directly respond to the community vision and our residents' priority of providing more housing opportunities for all. It was a recurring theme during our public engagement and visioning exercises. Public came out and said that we need to work on providing affordable housing and ensuring that the housing needs are met in our county. So we're trying to translate the community priorities into actionable policies that support future for all of our Pasco residents and for them to have an access to affordable and safe housing. And now we can start the discussion if you want to go through the policies, the new policies. That's all. This is not a presentation. We want to have a conversation. I want to present you. I want to talk to you. I want to converse with you and discuss.
So, do you mind if I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I want to start at what I think is the biggest issue, in my opinion, and that's objective 1.2, and that is the definition of what is affordable housing. So my first comment is, why did you leave out extremely low?
Mr. Goldstein, did you say objective 1.2?
1.2. So
Okay.
I assume this is the definition of what we're considering, because it says facilitate development of affordable housing products for very low, low, and moderate income households. So my first question to you is, why was extremely low left out of that definition?
So the objective is not a definition. We will have a definition of affordable housing in the glossary.
Okay, then I
The
guess well, then let's stop there. I need to see that then, because, I mean, I guess let me just state my overall concern. Okay, so we have an inclusionary zoning study, which is the bullet that you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
And it basically shows that for rental, we have a deficit for extremely low, very low, and basically extremely low and very low. We don't even actually have a deficit for low or moderate in the rental. For owner occupied, we have a deficit for extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income.
Okay.
My concern is that you sort of, these terms matter, okay? And I feel like, I don't know whether I need to target this objective 1.2 or I should be looking at the definition that's in the glossary, but I think you need to better define what our need for affordable housing is using the terms that are consistent with the deficits that are in our study.
Certainly, yes.
So I think you need to rewrite objective 1.2 that this is the main objective of this policy that talks about, that makes it consistent with the study in terms of our actual deficits.
It's a good addition to the objective to put extremely low in there. It just makes it more consistent throughout the text. That's all.
I'm not sure why extremely low was left out, period, because it's a separate statutory, it's under 30% AMI.
I think generally, objectives are written with very general terminology, not very specific terminology. In this case, I think it makes sense to add extremely low. I think very low was trying to cover it as general English, but because the terminology is
well, it's a separate statutory definition in 420 for extremely low, which is below 30% of AMI.
Yeah.
And we have a deficit below 30% of AMI, whether it's rental or owner occupied. So
yeah, there's no
I
problem.
think it needs to be included, but I want to be clear. My concern is not just adding extremely low. On moderate income, we actually don't have a deficit as it relates to rental. And this objective is saying that we're going to facilitate development of moderate income housing. Now, if this policy said to the extent we have deficits identified in our study, I don't think I have an issue with it.
Okay.
But it appears, and this is throughout the entire, because this term affordable housing is used throughout the entire chapter. So I don't know where to put it, but we need to somehow tailor that term to our actual need.
David, can I get you to back up in this stuff?
Okay.
To help me out here.
Did they work?
One of the first questions that I have about all of this.
They did look at that. Yeah.
What?
They didn't say anything.
What are our statutory obligations? What I want to understand first is, what does the state require that our plan include, so that I can separate from what the state requires from what we're adding beyond what the state requires. And you just referenced the definitions of very low, low, and moderate income, and you mentioned 30% AMI. Where do these things come from? And
well, I may probably need Elizabeth to address this question, but if you're
what I'm
asking
trying to
just what is
understand is,
if you're asking like what is the bare minimum that needs to go in a comp plan, I'm gonna have to let Elizabeth get up
and
and
I'll just say
discuss
this. I'm taken aback. I don't know what's going on with Florida statutes or this, and I'm going to ask the next question. The follow-up question is what WTH is inclusionary zoning? And you said we have a study that says we have a deficit of owner-occupied homes for very low income housing, and that's defined as 30% AMI. What's the AMI number for us?
area median income.
I understand that. What is the number?
Oh, If we had somebody from community development, they can give us that exact number, but I don't know. They're here.
$50,000, $60,000?
That rings a bell. I thought it was somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, and 30% of that number? Well, yeah, of course, we have a deficit of owner-occupied homes. Who can
Well,
afford?
and rentals.
What are they supposed to buy, a tent?
Well, we have a deficit of both rental and owner-occupied, and
Well, at 30% AMI, that's like, no kidding. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is there some statute that says, you know, we gotta figure out how to make homes affordable for people that make 30% of the area median income? Because that's just ludicrous on its face.
well.
Rental,
housing-
yeah, I understand that. And maybe those have to be subsidized, but owner occupied, you can't afford groceries at 30% AMI, let alone a mortgage payment.
Well, okay, to be clear, housing takes various forms, right? So the staff is actually working on housing types, you know, whether it's container homes. I mean, there may be some housing types that could be made affordable even to extremely low-income individuals.
Well, okay.
So this is not, I don't know that this is saying that how exactly how we meet this goal of facilitating this housing or what form it would be, but arguably a tent is a form of housing.
Right, and it's not permittable under the Florida Building Code, and that's gonna bring me to one of my questions. I did have here in 1.2.2, it says Pasco County shall review annually the land development code, and then crossed out is and building regulations. Well, if you wanna solve an affordable housing problem, the first thing you need to do is somebody needs to start lobbying the Florida Building Code Commission to allow the construction of buildings which can be affordable, and I will give you some crazy examples. One of the things that's required is impact-resistant windows. Can somebody show me, even after last year's hurricane, how many hurricanes in a row? How many homes in Sea Pines, Gulf Harbors, along the coast, or inland through county did we have reports of wind-blown out, smashed out windows? Not one. I'm not going to say there's not one. Few and far between. Flooding was our issue. These are things which are driving up the cost of home construction, all in the name of overdone public safety. We require windows that you can shoot a 2x4 at 100 miles an hour. And I recognize that the county has very little jurisdiction over the building code, but our county commissioners, if you're listening, we need to lobby the state to change building regulations. David mentioned container homes. David, a standard shipping container is 8 feet wide. The Florida Building Code says no room can have a dimension less than 7 feet wide. I can't make a 7-foot wide room in an 8-foot wide shipping container and still meet the means of egress within and out of it. I can't do that under the code. So somebody has to, we need to be reviewing building regulations, and we need to be lobbying our state legislatures to rein in the Florida Building Code Commission, who in my personal opinion is being dictated to by, one, the International Building Code Committee, and then two, the insurance companies. They've created a bunch of ridiculous requirements that are all pricing us out of the housing market.
So, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, there's very limited, you have limited authority to change the Florida Building Code here. I mean, I think the most that you could put into a comp plan would be that something, a general statement that Pasco County shall support policies that are amendments to the Florida Building Code that would reduce the cost of housing. I mean, we could put a general, I mean, that general statement could be put into a comp plan, but you can't do much more than that.
I get it. I understood that we don't have jurisdiction over that, but I'm getting at that we've crossed this out of the policy. We do need to be reviewing building regulations and understand what those impediments are to affordable housing. And I think we all understand that housing is becoming unaffordable even for people of and above AMI. The costs of taxes and insurance are now more than the principal and interest payments on houses. That's not traditionally how that market works. And we've got to do something about it on that end too. But I think we need to recognize as a community, looking back just to our last discussion 5 minutes ago, every time we pass a regulation, we drive up the cost of housing. All right, the builders just told us if their tree mitigation went from $1 million to $7 million. Well, somebody's got to pay for it, and unfortunately, we know how that works. They ain't going to eat it. It went into the price of that house, and that house just became more unaffordable. And I'm not saying we shouldn't protect trees. I'm saying we need to strike a balance when we do these things, and we need to think about these things, including building regulations.
David, you want to continue?
Yeah, so getting back to what is affordable housing. So I think that 1.2, I don't know whether, again, this is in the definition of affordable housing or in 1.2, but you need to narrow it to our actual need. And my preference would be to then make that a defined term, affordable housing, and that's the defined term you use throughout the chapter, so that I'm not having to, every single policy, figure out when you use that term affordable housing what you mean. Because the study was very clear, and or even if 1.2 was said something like facilitate the development of affordable housing products needed in Pasco County pursuant to the most recent study of, I'd be okay with that. But your blanket statement of that just limits us to very low, low, and moderate, it's excluding the low end, okay, which is a problem. And I think it's over-inclusive on the high end. Because that study was very clear that on rental, we don't have a deficit of affordable housing in the 80 and 120% AMI range. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
Okay.
You always make sense.
Well, I have some other comments that are more minor, but that was my biggest one. But I think, but I don't want to, if other people have comments, I won't go down my entire list. So.
David, can I go ahead and explain why I'm here?
Yeah, sure. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Elizabeth Blair, Pasco County Attorney's Office. But for each one of these chapters or elements, whatever you want to call them, there are requirements in Florida statute, and I've asked that Hyatt and her folks make sure that they list out what those exact requirements are verbatim from statute, and which one of the policies and objectives are an attempt to respond to that requirement in Florida statute. And that's kind of like the baseline that you have to check those boxes, because the agency is going to take out their template, check, 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 Pasco County did these things in their element. So there's going to be somewhat of a roadmap for each one of these for you. Okay? Then anything else in addition to that is Pasco specific or regional specific. Okay?
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Elizabeth.
Terry.
Okay, since, oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something, John?
I was going to, since we're in 1.2, unless, David, you want to keep going either way.
No, go ahead, Chris. I got a lot, so get your.
Oh, I just had one quick question. When I was reading 1.2.5 on the neighborhoods targeted for affordable and workforce housing, I was just curious what that would look like. And then I know from the previous one, with the strike-through, there were several communities that had been targeted in the previous comp plan. So my question was, were any of those done? What was the success of those? And then also, like I said, when we talk about targeting these communities for affordable housing, what would we envision that would look like? I mean, what would be the outcome? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Well, I think firstly, the way the comprehensive plan was written, it included information that was probably more related to the work that a particular department would be doing specifically. So if there were plans made for Banjo Drive or Elfers, Lacucci, Moon Lake, etc., these would have been operational documents prepared and maintained by Community Development Department, or perhaps a predecessor department of the Community Development Department. And so they're taken out of this version of the comprehensive plan because it's considered more operational. So what you could expect is a department that is constituent to this policy would essentially follow the instruction of the policy and make their map and their target neighborhoods and then work on their departmental plan to improve these areas specifically. In the way that if they wanted to add more neighborhoods today, they would have to come in for a comprehensive plan amendment, go through the state review process, et cetera, just to add an extra neighborhood in that they recently discovered, let's say, or to remove a neighborhood or an area that has been taken care of or has changed, and now they need to reprioritize their operations, essentially. So by removing it and making it easier for the department to respond to the needs of the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I?
We just don't want to keep updating the comprehensive plan
Sure.
every single time
Yep.
there's a neighborhood added to the list.
That makes sense to me. I will just tell you that when I first read this section, I was a little offended. I'm targeting somebody's neighborhood for what you think should happen in somebody's neighborhood, or who thinks what should happen, and what does that mean? What am I targeting? And who decides some area should be targeted, and what's the criteria to be targeted? I'd like you to kind of spell that out. I understand if we have areas that are slum and blight and we're trying to clean these things up. But I think, how does someone make a decision on where they want to live? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not interested in living in a neighborhood that's targeted to have affordable housing put into it. How do these people know what that is? At least before there was a list. I'm not sure I agree with the list or whatever, but that leaves some mystery, and I don't understand what that means. And I'm hoping you can clue me in as to what is inclusionary zoning.
Well, that's on my list, so
okay. If
I could just quickly get through my list.
Can we go back, and Terry, since you're the guy, you're the future land use guy, let me just go back right to the top. This is 1.1.1. Pasco County shall ensure that the future land use classifications and the future land use map allow a sufficient residential density to accommodate the county's projected population without the need for future land use map amendments. Well, how are you going to ensure that? How are you going to ensure that the section that you're about to write, that we're not here to review today, but will be some other day, accommodates the projected population without the need for any future land use amendments? And I'm trying to figure out, if I have a ranch out in the middle of the county that's got a future land use designation of AGR, and Lennar wants to come build a community there, then aren't we going to need a future land use map amendment?
I don't think this is, first of all, I think this is a better discussion for Pasco Groves, but that
It's
being
in
said,
here.
but I don't know that this policy prohibits somebody from pursuing a future land use amendment to get a higher density than, this is just saying that at a minimum, we need to have enough flu areas to accommodate our projected population. Is that how you read it, Jerry?
Yeah.
But it says he's going to ensure that it happens.
Yeah.
Right, but I don't know that it prohibits somebody from seeking a future
No, I'm not
land
saying
use.
it does. I'm
Okay.
asking you how you're going to ensure that happens without a
Well,
future land use amendment.
this is what they do. When they did Pasco Groves, this was their duty, to make sure that the future land use map was sufficient to meet our population. But I think you should defer that conversation to Pasco Groves, in my opinion, because
Okay. Fair enough.
that is a future land use issue, not so much an issue for this.
Okay, so then this is here. Why is this in housing and not grows? 1.1.3. Comprehensive plan amendment applications, which supposedly aren't going to be needed by policy 1.111, must be supported by population growth trends, residential demand, overall growth patterns, and by the goals, objectives, and policies of the Pasco Grows chapter of the comprehensive plan. I'm not sure why this is in the housing element. And must be supported by population growth trends, residential demand, overall growth patterns. I'm trying to put myself in Barbara or Clark's shoes, and what's my burden now to come in here? What does that mean? How do we evaluate that?
So this is language that is basically coming from state statute requirements for housing. So with every residential density increase that's proposed, there has to be a housing need for it. You have to demonstrate it to the state. And this is basically the language that the state requires, a population growth trend analysis. You have to demonstrate overall growth patterns. What this policy is addressing is what the state statute is asking for when we submit the comprehensive plan amendments. And applicants have been submitting this information.
So, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be argumentative. This is an example question. Under that requirement, how do I create the next villages? All right. Somebody had a vision and decided to go in and buy a whole bunch of land in 3 counties and create this giant retirement Disneyland up there. Well, there was no growth trend in that area. How does someone with vision go do something if they must do this? How do I create the next Walt Disney World? Walt Disney had the vision to go in and buy a whole bunch of land in the middle of Florida where there was no people whatsoever, and create a place for people to come, and then eventually grow. What
Terry,
this seems to me to
Terry, before we spend a lot of time on this issue, can we get the answer to the first question, which is why is this in the housing element as opposed to in Grows? Because again, this seems like a discussion that's more appropriate for Pasco Grows than the housing element. So can it just be moved to the Pasco Grows?
Well, Policy Lives 113 is talking about when a comprehensive plan amendment is proposed, how to increase density. That has to be addressed specifically through the housing element itself. So this policy is referring to what you must do to prove the density and be consistent with the housing element.
But it's also deferring to Grows. But it's also deferring to the Grows chapter for more information and, of course, related to the future land use.
Elizabeth, is this something that statutorily has to be in the housing element?
I'm looking through the list right now, that table that she had up, I'm not finding it right now. Sorry, clerk. I'm not seeing 1.1.3 on the table.
Hold on.
So I don't think it's paired to a policy as of yet.
I mean, it could be.
1.1.3.
It's.
I'm not saying Mr. Moody's point isn't a legitimate point. I'm just, it seems like a debate that's more appropriate for Pasco Grows, and I'm asking.
Yeah. I recommend keeping some comprehensive plan amendment directional language in the housing element, because we do refer to the housing element when talking about residential density increases. We point to that, and we talk to a lot of the applicants about the housing element when they're making residential density proposals. As far as the initial discussion on Policy Lives 111, the end phrase there is probably unnecessary. We could probably take that out and just end it at the county's projected population. But it's important that the housing element at least take a nod at the residential densities, and let Pasco Grows, enable Pasco Grows to do its thing.
I'm more concerned about the word must. What I'm concerned about is,
well,
I understand that we should make a consideration of population growth trends and growth patterns in a comprehensive plan amendment, but the word "must be supported" creates a regulation.
To sort of answer your question from before, how do you make the next villages? How do you have a vision or something? I would just kind of point to what we've done here in Pasco County with the villages of Pasadena Hills and the planning process that took place so many decades ago on the establishment of the many different villages within VOPH. Certainly at that time, especially given the fact that it was on the cusp of the Great Recession when that planning was happening, there probably wasn't a growth trend to support the ambitious plan of the villages of Pasadena Hills. Nevertheless, it made it through the approval process, including the state approval process, because of the planning that took place and the activities that were all included in that. So this doesn't preclude anybody from visioning something into existence. Certainly other places like Central Pasco Employment Village had a similar visioning process that occurred, that actually happened, and is now starting to get built.
I get it, and I sat
Right.
here on this board and was one of the people that had to consider VOPH back when it was first being conceived. My bigger concern is the word "must." Should
Well,
be
I guess the question
consideration,
is,
yes.
well, I don't know what the intent is, but if it was changed to say must be supported by factors such as population growth trends,
Sure.
residential demand, overall growth patterns, I mean, if these are all just factors that are considered as part of a comp plan amendment,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm getting at.
We could do
but
that.
I don't know if that was staff's intent. It is?
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
Then you can just change it to say must be supported by factors such as,
Okay.
and then that.
Which shall include, may not be limited to, I got
Such
you.
as is this basically the same
That
thing.
works. Same thing, I'm good.
yeah.
Tell me when you're done so I can get to my list. I just want to get quickly.
This is a lot of stuff, I could be here all day, but
Well, mine will be quick
I-
if you let me get through it.
I said my piece on targeted neighborhoods, and David, I'm sorry, I'm quickly going through, I had made some highlights. I'm to the section of inclusionary zoning, I don't know what that means. It says Pasco County, this is 1.2.10, Pasco County shall implement an inclusionary zoning program as determined by the outcome of the relevant studies, and I don't know what that means, the relevant studies.
So which one are you on?
1.2.10.
So Pasco County shall consider implementing an inclusionary zoning program.
I don't know what inclusionary zoning means, and I don't know what
So
relevant studies are.
that's on my list, and I was going to suggest a modification to that, but, because I don't think it's just inclusionary zoning. I think the discussion that we've had with the consultant is that that we consider either inclusionary zoning, it's not necessarily regulatory, it could be incentives. Okay, so what it's basically saying is that when development comes in, will you set aside some of your units for affordability? That's basically what it means. There's two ways to do that. You can do that in a regulatory way, you can do that in an incentive way. There's also the concept of a fee in lieu of doing that, or a linkage fee, which, what that was gonna be one of my comments, is that I don't think it's, the study that's underway isn't looking at just inclusionary zoning, it's looking at, okay, can you set aside some units, or can you pay a fee in lieu of setting aside some units, or can you, or we'll give you incentives if you set aside some units. There's various things that are being discussed that aren't necessarily limited to just inclusionary zoning. But strictly inclusionary zoning means when you get a rezoning for 20 new units, 5 of those units will be affordable. If I use the strict term of inclusionary zoning.
Okay, well, you haven't exactly told me what inclusionary zoning is, but based on your explanation, I'm getting the idea. And what I'm trying to understand, is this something the state's telling us we have to do?
No, I don't think it's a state mandated requirement. What it is the study that we're talking about has identified that we have a deficit of certain types of affordable housing, which I talked about earlier. The point of this program is to try to meet that deficit.
It would be.
And by the way, it says consider, so this is not mandatory. This is not.
No, this says shall implement.
I'm reading, the version I'm reading in 1.2.2 says Pasco County shall consider implementing.
1.2.10, and at least what they gave us here to download, says Pasco County shall implement an inclusionary zoning program as determined by the outcome of the relevant
I'm looking
studies.
at the one that's online. It says, I just literally
mine
downloaded it.
says shall consider.
It says shall consider.
But I downloaded the link that Hyatt sent us to download. If
Has
it's
this
been
changed?
You should have all gotten the same document, but it is.
I just read it.
Okay, I can resend this one to you.
I'm fine with shall considering it.
Yeah.
Well,
consider, my big thing, and I've learned from working with some of the land use attorneys, is I have no issue with aspiring to do something in our comprehensive plan. I have an issue when it mandates something. And I understand maybe there's appropriate mandates that need to be, but that's what we're here to discuss.
That's all that's happening right now is it's a consideration.
Okay, if it's a consideration, I am absolutely fine with it. I want to make sure if Toll Brothers wants to come down here and build $1 million neighborhood, that they're not going to be told they have to have 5 affordable units in their $1 million Polo Club neighborhood.
The program that
Because
we're
that's
talking
ridiculous.
about isn't necessarily that. That was gonna be one of my comments is, even what we're considering isn't limited to just this. So, it's more than, there's also a possibility, say Toll Brothers does only wanna build $1 million homes. Part of our discussion is maybe they could pay a fee in lieu of providing 5 units, that we could use that money for a nonprofit to build affordable housing elsewhere. So, it's not strictly inclusionary zoning that we're considering. But anyway, let me know when you're done so I can get
Shall
my-
consider is great.
Yeah, that version is different than what I was sent too. So I don't mean,
me
what
too.
else changed? Anything?
Right, that's, I
spent
downloaded
5
what you
hours
sent
reviewing
it.
this stuff last night.
You sent me an email with links to download it, I downloaded it.
Well, we have it on the overhead, just to be certain.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. It'd be nice to know what I'm working from.
Can I get my minor points out yet, or are you not done yet? John?
Well, I'm gonna save 1.3.5 for the Board of County Commissioners. I listened to their discussion the other day, and I'll just say I was shocked. But they're the elected officials, and they can go deal with that problem. I'll stay out of that. Energy efficiency, is that something that's mandated by the state?
Which policy?
1.4.14, at least in the version I have. My particular issue is I just watched a charitable organization get a change order to put in devices which sense when somebody's in the room and turn the lights off because somebody's decided that people aren't mature enough to turn the lights off. So I need a device to do it for me instead.
It was an existing policy that we just pretty much updated the language.
Yeah, so this was an existing policy where the language was just clarified. The previous language was Pasco County shall promote an active partnership between the county and the Florida Solar Energy Center.
I see.
The new language is Pasco County shall promote energy conservation and energy efficiency measures, more broader, in the construction, rehabilitation
I'm
of
fine with
existing
that as
buildings.
long as it's promote,
Promote, yes,
not mandate.
correct.
Okay. David, this is 1.5.5. Pasco County shall seek to spatially deconcentrate housing units serving vulnerable populations and integrate them into existing neighborhoods, developments, and communities. So the way I'm interpreting it is I'm not gonna have a place for the homeless down wherever we build one. I'm gonna go insert them into your neighborhood.
Which one are you reading?
John, this, I don't know, the version you and I got that we were sent isn't even close to what they have.
My version of 1.5.5 doesn't say what you're saying.
David, I don't know. All I know is I got sent an email that says, here's what we're gonna talk about. I downloaded what
I'm looking at the same document you're looking at, John, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Mr. Moody, can I see what you're looking at?
looking at the link that you emailed me.
Whatever's on the
Well,
shelf.
there was a link sent to us, and I downloaded off the link, so I could
There's a
mark
link
up
in
my
the
question.
This is the document from the link
There's a link
you
in the agenda
emailed
too
to
that
us.
takes you to the website.
But it looks like that's now 1.5.6 in the document you're looking at.
Yes, so it does have the language that you're talking about. So your question is whether, I don't know that that's requiring us to put them in existing neighborhoods. I think it's saying that we will, I think they're trying to say that we don't want these.
Yeah, this is not a requirement.
Vulnerable population housing all in one area of the county is the way I'm reading that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just asking, is this a state criteria?
Well, that was going to be one of my minor comments, which is, to a certain extent, we're preempted on some of these community homes, I believe if there's 6 units or below, and so we need to talk about.
Well, I understand that. When there's a preemption, that's what I'm trying to understand, or what are local initiatives versus or what are state mandated initiatives?
Other than what's in the state statute that we're preempted by, I don't think that, Elizabeth, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think that 1.5.6 is a state mandatory requirement.
I don't think it is.
And to a certain extent, it's a little inconsistent with 1.5.5 because 1.5.5 has citing criteria for these things, which may be, some of those may be counter to what's in 1.5.6. So I do think the section needs some work.
Okay.
Because it may be internally inconsistent. But that
So
was one of my minor points that I was in.
I do recognize we're pressed for time, so
Is the idea, though, to, I think 156 is simply trying to say that use 155 and the criteria therein, but don't put everybody in the same spot if you identify a location based on 155. That's what 156, I think, is getting at.
that may be. When my neighbors read this, they make it the interpretation that Pasco County is going to put a homeless camp in the middle of my neighborhood. So I want to make it clear to people that are reading this that, well, maybe that is your intent. That's what I'm trying to discern.
So how to word that?
Because I think people that do own property here and have pride of ownership in their neighborhoods also have a reasonable expectation that I'm not going to come insert a mental institution or a homeless camp or whatever the case may be into a stable neighborhood and deteriorate those values. I'm not saying that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that.
So I think there's an easy solution to this. I think what staff is saying is their intent was just not to have all of it concentrated in one area of the county. You could just stop the sentence as Pasco County shall seek to spatially deconcentrate housing units serving vulnerable populations, period.
That's why I like you.
Yeah.
I think it's the big bucks that way.
That's why you're a good lawyer.
Because the prior version referred you back to the citing criteria, which
Yeah.
arguably constrained it, and the new version doesn't.
Sure.
So
That's
if you just
fair.
stopped it as after populations, you don't have that inconsistency.
Yep, that's a good change.
Can I get to my other minor changes?
I'm done.
I'll be quick.
It was only 13 pages.
Okay.
At least in the version I got.
All right, so 1.1.5, it talks about missing middle. Is that a defined term in the glossary, or is it only defined in this policy? It's a question.
Which policy again? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, it's 1.1.4. It says elimination of barriers for missing middle housing. And it talks about, it says missing middle housing types, and it says e.g. duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and multiplexes. Is that the definition of which, because missing middle means different things to different people. If what you mean is duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and multiplexes, I'm okay with that.
Yes.
But then I think e.g. should say i.e., not e.g.
Okay. Yes, when we were referring to missing middle, it's the forms of the
Then
structures.
I would please change e.g. to i.e.
Yep.
Because those mean two different things.
Yep.
But my other question about the same policy is the barrier into these things isn't necessarily in the land development code. It might be in the comp plan itself. There may be density limits in the comp plan that
Yes.
prohibit duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and multiplexes.
Yes.
Is Pasco Groves going to address that?
Yes.
It does.
So Pasco Groves makes the space for missing middle to occur.
Okay, then that,
This is
so,
both.
okay, all right,
So,
so 1.2.4, there's a statement there about reducing or waiving impact fees, mobility fees, connection fees, and permit fees. Two comments. One is that we've already done this for impact fees and mobility fees. So I'm not sure why it's telling us that we still need to do it. But more importantly, are you positive utilities said it was okay to reduce connection fees? Because my understanding is they've always objected to that because of their bond covenants. So I don't have an issue with the impact fees, mobility fees, and permit fees, because I think
it's now a different.
to certain, most extent, we've waived a lot of those anyway. But you need to talk to utilities about whether they really can waive connection fees.
We'll double check with them.
Okay.
And if they don't, we'll just delete it.
Okay.
David, I'm sorry, she's trying to clarify the documents that we got. But can we go back, Terry, back to missing middle for
Yes.
a second? One, thank you for providing examples, because I've heard this term bandied about and I never knew what the heck we were talking about. I get it. The question that I have is this. I hear this term bandied about, and they call it the missing middle, but has anybody looked at the reasons that the middle is missing, if this
Yes.
is what we call the middle?
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, we did have these housing types. But the reason we don't have these housing types anymore is they proved to be problematic. And my very first house was a duplex. I lived in one side, I rented out the other. And it was a good thing while I lived in one side and I rented out the other, because I was there and I could manage that property. When I finally moved out to something beyond that housing type, I was now an absentee landlord. And then that property became a problem. And that's what the cities have experienced. In fact, Newport Richey went out of its way to write ordinance to make sure they didn't get any more of this type of housing.
Well, a lot of
And they have a lot of it in the city, which has proven to be problematic. They have elevated, you have absentee landlords in those cases. And we don't have pride of ownership because they're tenants. They end up with an exceedingly high number of police calls. They end up, because the landlords are absentee, the maintenance on the property runs down. Like I said, we don't have pride of ownership. The reason this is missing is the market has reacted to this and found it to be problematic. So all of a sudden, somebody's got this idea that, hey, wait, we need to bring back all the triplexes and duplexes, and oh, I'm not so sure that that's what we need. And have we really looked at and I don't care if we bring these back. I said, I used to own one. But I think if we want to bring these back, then we need to bring them back and we need to understand or try to make them a housing type that doesn't have the problems, which is the reason cities zoned them right out. That's the reason they got zoned out of the zoning code, is because they were problems.
So, is there a solution to this, which is just change this one to make it more of a we'll consider doing this? Because it is something that we've talked about doing, but it hasn't really been fully vetted. So,
agreed.
I mean, can we make this more like the inclusionary zoning concept, where it's, instead of being mandatory that we remove these regulatory barriers, that we'll consider removing regulatory barriers for those things?
Well, I mean, the policy says shall review the land development code to identify and revise.
Yeah, but that sounds like we have to do it, so the way I'm reading it. So that we have to,
So may review.
Shall
we have to
consider
review the
a
land
review.
development code and to identify and revise regulatory, that makes it sound like we have to remove regulatory barriers to those things.
You know, on the question of, yes. I mean,
I'm just saying, I'm trying to
yeah,
speed this up. If it,
Yeah.
if I suspect if I change it to we'll consider doing these things, Mr. Moody's not gonna have as much of an objection.
Or just may review. not
shall
must review.
consider a review of the land development code? I mean,
No, I don't, if it said Pasco County shall review the land development code, to identify regulatory barriers well, let me put this, and consider revising regulatory barriers for developing, if it said that.
So we shall review the development.
You have to
And
review
then-
it,
yes.
okay?
Okay.
And consider revising regulatory barriers for developing missing middle housing sites.
sure.
Okay.
I would just say that
Is that better?
absentee landlordism is a facet of any housing type. It's not specific. It exists with single-family homes too, right? So you can have a single-family detached neighborhood, very typical R3 subdivision, and within that subdivision, you will have people who own the property, live somewhere else, and rent it out. So it's not a foolproof way to avoid absentee landlordism.
Yeah, I'm trying to
But
avoid
I'm
the
just-
policy discussion.
yeah,
I don't
I'm
want to have
just
a policy fight
mentioning
between you
for
and
the
Mr. Moody
purposes
about
of the
whether this
public.
is a good or bad idea. All I'm saying is that since the idea hasn't been fully vetted through the amendments to the land development code, let's just say consider so that,
Yes, yeah, I'm fine with that. We're
Okay.
fine with that.
So, because of time constraints, I'm going to suggest that we continue
Pause.
this after the regular meeting, after lunch break.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Is that
Thank
okay?
you.
All right, very good. So, unless there's an objection, I'll adjourn the meeting until after lunch.
County